And good morning.
Good morning.
How you doing, sunshine?
I'm all right. You know, I think with the way you bang the desk, that's why the camera drifts.
It may be. That's what this is for. I have a... yeah.
All right. Okay, so good morning to Steve. Good morning to the lovely Danielle Munoz, as she is referred to by her co-host.
And your Majesty.
Yes, and good morning, Steve. Now, which Steve I said good morning to first and which Steve I said good morning to second, I'll continue to let that just be a mystery.
Well, the mystery is proper Steve and other Steve. But
well, that's your mystery.
We can see that the Rotemeyer, in fact, drew first blood. Ah!
Okay, this is true. This is true.
And LT Atom Bomb,
which is just a great name. I'm just Cameron Anderson.
Remember Duke Nukem?
Vaguely.
No, the correct question is, which one? There was a video game called Duke Nukem.
Mm-hmm.
Right? And he was a clear spoof of Snake Plissken with all his, I'm here to kick ass and chew bubble gum, and I'm all out of gum.
That actually doesn't come from Escape from New York. That comes from a different John Carpenter movie called They Live.
True. Fair.
Have you seen They Live?
I haven't.
It is.
Wait, that's the one with giant ants, right?
No,
that's them.
That's right. They Live is worth watching. It's just worth watching. It is bizarre. It is peak John Carpenter.
The other Duke Nukem was a villain in Captain Planet.
Oh. Yeah, no.
Not the same character.
Not the same character at all.
The Duke Nukem video game, Duke Nukem 3D, where they went from platformer to first-person shooter. The premise is there are aliens that came and they're stealing all our women, and the game just starts with him next to a crashed spaceship getting ready to kill a bunch of aliens, and he says, "Nobody steals our chicks and lives."
Yeah.
Yeah, great game. So anyway,
boy.
This morning we're talking about cancellations, and these are special cancellations that I'm going to put all in the category of toter win.
Win. This guy so much sack. He protect, he attack. This why no more homo erotic rocket ranches. Got it? Got it. Oh jeez. So much wang.
Okay. I gotta say, you know what? Old sound at the top comment today. Neil Young for spelling it amusingly. I like that.
Very amusingly.
Okay, and before we get into the stories, let me explain why I categorize these as toter wins. These various cancellations are not just cancellations, right? Cancel culture is a big deal. It has been a cancer, an ongoing cancer in this country, where leftists act with impunity, and they use this activity to cause harm. Family Guy did a great bit on it where Peter got a new job and some schmuck millennial with an iPhone said, "And now you're fired," right? Because the cancel culture doesn't just come for big names like Joe Rogan, right? We've seen it go as far as CNN actually doxing, which is always attempted murder, CNN, you murderers. The kid that made a meme out of Donald Trump hitting McMahon, whatever, the owner of the WWF, hit him in the face with a chair, and some kid just superimposed the CNN logo over it, which was hilarious, right? Cheap gag, funny, little short GIF meme. But in this case, what we're seeing is the cancellation backfire. And we need to celebrate this, and we need to tell these companies like Spotify and Disney that, hey, we approve when you punish people for their bad behavior, when you punish actual bad actors for their bad behavior, we approve. And there's a difference here. Because the behavior that's being punished, right, there is a speech which should be censored. And it is that speech which seeks to censor any speech. Right? So I'm a First Amendment absolutist.
Absolutely.
As soon as your speech is used to cause harm to another person's right to speak, that's the only time that your speech should be treated as malicious, because it is malicious. In that case, you are using your speech to cause harm to someone else. Right? So just like the whole, oh, well, you can't shout fire at a crowded theater. See, there are reasonable restrictions on the First Amendment. Bullshit. That is not a restriction on the First Amendment. You can absolutely shout fire in a crowded theater if it's on fire. However, what is a crime is to defraud people, to say untrue things which cause people to take predictable actions. That's why doxing and swatting are crimes. That's why they're always attempted murder. There's a clear outcome that you're seeking through the use of the dissemination of information. In the case of doxing, that information is not necessarily false. In the case of swatting, it is necessarily false. But when you lie to cause harm to someone, it's a big deal. Or when you just choose to cause harm to someone. So,
you know, it's funny. I was just going to say, we talked yesterday, and it's funny because I just brought it up to be funny, to be a cheeky little bastard, because I thought it was hysterical. Who would win in a fight with Joe Rogan or Neil Young? Turns out we now have an answer.
We do. And as of yesterday's show, it looked like the answer was Joe Rogan won because Spotify was just going to ignore Neil Young. And this is why it's so good. Spotify to pull Neil Young music after ultimatum letter demanding Rogan be removed. That's hilarious. And this is a total win. Spotify is reportedly in the process of removing music from folk rock star Neil Young after the 76-year-old gave the audio platform an ultimatum. Remove the incredibly popular Joe Rogan Experience podcast or lose Neil Young's music. It apparently didn't take too long for Spotify to choose, a Wall Street Journal report outlined Wednesday.
You know how we talk about framing? It's funny, because you can find it in all things. Notice how it refers to Joe Rogan as popular and not Neil Young.
Correct. And that's fair. Neil Young is not especially popular today. He's well known, but he's not...
Is he though?
Yes. Yes, he is. When we heard this headline, we immediately knew who Neil Young was. Even if I haven't listened to a Neil Young song, like I haven't intentionally gone out of my way to find a song by Neil Young in I can't tell you how long, if ever. And, you know, one of the reasons that Neil Young is not as popular today as he was when he was younger, the way that other musicians are, is Neil Young was a protest musician. So, kind of like doing political analysis content, you know, our stuff is very timely. If you didn't see it, you know, while we were live or within a week or so, it's probably not relevant anymore, right? We don't get as many views on our older shows, on our older episodes, because we talk about current topical stuff. And a lot of Neil Young's music is that way. It was current topical at the time that it was written, and that was 50 years ago. I know it was 50 years ago because it was before me.
Well, no, okay. In all seriousness, you can do protest music and anti-culture, whatever. I'm blanking on the name of it.
Counterculture.
Counterculture, thank you. Yeah. You could do that kind of music, and if it's really good music, it sticks around. Like, listen to the Forrest Gump soundtrack. Like, half the songs in it are counterculture songs, and they're also kind of timeless good songs, okay? Neil Young might have just kind of outed himself as, well, look, okay.
As an old commie.
As an old well, I mean, I had a few jokes come to mind and be like, okay, now that Spotify is throwing him off, he's going to miss that $58 a month.
Now,
Yeah. Okay.
and that's funny. Now, he was probably making a little more than that on Spotify, but
the joke stands.
But the joke stands.
And then I thought of another joke to be like, hey, guess what? Neil Young got to be relevant one more time in his life.
Well, and so here's why it matters, though. Neil Young, it never occurred to him that there would be a backlash, that there would be consequences, right? In his math, it was probably, okay, if I threaten to pull my music, I'm Neil frickin' Young.
Right.
I'm a big badass rock star.
That's right.
If I threaten to pull my music down, they'll kick this son of a bitch off the platform because I don't like his opinions about vaccines and the like. And to be clear, Rogan is not an anti-vaccine guy. Right?
No, he just
Rogan
has
got
people
smeared Rogan got smeared by CNN and them because he used ivermectin as part of his treatment when he had COVID, and it was prescribed to him by a doctor. And then CNN went on the air to try and make Rogan sound like he was some stupid hillbilly that went to the feed store and got a tube of horse paste because ivermectin happens to also be used as part of a horse dewormer medication. But this is a medication which has been used in humans for decades.
Disclaimer, YouTube, we're not offering medical advice. We're only reporting on what Joe Rogan did. And the way CNN was disingenuous about that is it's kind of like the primary thing you're going to take aspirin for is pain relief, okay? Like most bottles of aspirin don't say, oh, by the way, this can help keep you alive long enough to make it to the hospital if you have a heart attack.
Right.
However, if you have a heart attack and you want to keep yourself alive long enough to make it to the hospital...
Well, when the ambulance comes to pick your heart attacking ass up, they're going to give you some aspirin.
That's right. That's right. So to do what they did with Joe Rogan taking ivermectin is just disingenuous on so many levels. Like, all medicine is controlled toxicity.
But this, yes, but this here, well, all pharmaceutical medicine is controlled toxicity. Anyway.
Of our city.
But this one, this story here, it never occurred to Neil Young that they would say, oh, well, no, we're keeping Joe Rogan and you can go piss up the rope.
Yeah, right.
He, in his math, it was either they're going to take my threat seriously and cancel Joe Rogan, or everybody will just forget that I said anything. But nope. Spotify said, okay, you made your bed, and now you can go lie in it somewhere that isn't with us. So this is a win because it's not just that Neil Young lost. He's suffering consequences as a bad actor. And these are important consequences for this kind of bad actor because Neil Young was a protest artist. Notice I say was. When's the last time he wrote a song? Or published one anyway. And ostensibly a free speech guy. But we see now, just like all the other dirty hippie commies, he's not a free speech guy. He's a you can say whatever you want as long as you agree with me guy.
Well, like so many other communists, as soon as he got rich, I mean, all of them, all of these communist fuckers are the same. Rules for thee, but not for me.
You know, I'm glad you mentioned that because our next cancellation...
Oh, did I just segue us?
Yes, let's talk about scumbag leftist communists pulling up the ladder behind them. Right? So, Disney rethinking Snow White after Peter Dinklage calls out use of dwarves. So, Peter Dinklage is a dwarf and a bastard. Because, as Peter Dinklage said, all dwarves are bastards.
At least in the eyes of their
At least
father.
in the eyes of their fathers.
Right.
So, called out the supposedly progressive live-action remake of Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs. Okay, her skin was white as snow, and so they've cast her with a Latina chick. Like, okay, whatever, right? I am annoyed by the whole browning thing. Like, I loved Thor Ragnarok.
It's funny.
Great film. Hilarious.
But the one surviving Valkyrie?
But they made it a point to say, look at all these white blonde Valkyries that match not some stereotype, but
the
a
actual
mythos
description.
From a country where that's not the stereotype, it is the common makeup of the people. And yes, people see themselves in their own myths. And so in this film, we're going to kill all the white people and replace them all with a single brown chick. Right? But the rest of the movie was hilarious.
I mean, it was funny. Like, it really was funny, okay?
But, I don't have a whole lot of patience for your ethnogenocide, commies. But he's pitching a temper tantrum about the, and I quote, effing backwards, right? Calling the use of dwarves effing backwards. So Disney, in response, Disney said the filmmakers will be working with culture consultants to improve the story. To avoid reinforcing stereotypes from the original animated film, we are taking a different approach with these 7 characters, and have been consulting with members of the dwarfism community. A Disney spokesperson told the Post, "We look forward to sharing more as the film heads into production after a lengthy development period." So what we're seeing happen here is Disney fired the dwarves. And
from the story of Snow White and the 7 Dwarves.
Now,
only they're, what's it going to be called now? The Wise Latina and the 7 Not Dwarves?
The Wise Latina and her packed panel.
That's not bad. I feel like the Wise Latina is a good lead-off.
Well, they work in a mine. I guess we could go with the Wise Latina and seven dummies in her hole.
The Wise Latina.
That sounds on point for Disney, doesn't it?
The Wise Latina and the slave labor.
The Wise Latina and her Chinese and her Uyghur slave camp. That'll go over well in the CCP. So what Dinklage has done here, and he may not have even intended to, but it's something that these commie entertainers do often. Take Sarah Silverman, for example. She made her living on racism, on just vulgar racist sex jokes.
She was the pinnacle of the hot chick with a foul mouth, comedy shtick. And then once she made her millions, which included having an episode of her TV show in which she wore blackface, and ironically, she was criticizing the use of blackface in that episode. Okay, it was not flattering to people that use blackface. But once she made her millions, well, now nobody else should ever use blackface in any context ever again. Unless, of course, you're like the Canadian Prime Minister. Then for some reason it seems to be cool. But I digress.
And Jeff Goldblum points out that says he liked Dinklage until he said that people didn't like the end of Game of Thrones because they wanted to see all the white people be happy and get married. That's not why people didn't like the end of Game of Thrones.
No, people didn't like the end of Game of Thrones
because it didn't end.
Well, no, that's not the problem. The problem is the end of Game of Thrones was what happened in season 8 should have been stretched out over about 2 seasons. Be like, Dany's good. Now she's batshit crazy.
Right.
Which, if you read the books, you saw coming. But if you watch I understand why people who only watch the TV show were like, the hell just happened? It was like, oh, sorry, that's a thing they started setting up in, book 4.
Oh, and Steve mentions the midget wrestlers. I'm glad you mentioned that, because I've got a couple of articles here that I wanted to talk about. Related to do-gooders, right? Tampa, Florida, 96-centimeter tall radio personality has filed a federal lawsuit seeking to overturn Florida's ban on dwarf tossing. Now, this is back from 2001. This is an old story, but I wanted to bring it up and talk about this a little bit. And it's not the only story of its sort, right? You also had the Oompa Loompa situation. So, years and years ago now, 20-some years ago now, no, let me back up a little further. In the 80s especially, in Australia, in Florida, a few other places where you have a bunch of rednecks and criminals, it was popular to have dwarf tossing events at bars, right? Bar entertainment. And no shit, dwarves would be there, and they'd be wearing a harness with a handle on their back, and sometimes they'd have a Velcro suit. So there's a Velcro wall and a dwarf, padded Velcro
like
wall,
a Velcro dartboard,
right? or just a big stack of mattresses, right? Like a bunch of mattresses. And the game was, well, if you had the Velcro board, it actually had the big target on it, and you're trying to stick the dwarf on the bullseye, right? And then you had the mattress one where you're throwing them for distance, try and throw them as far as you can. And then a bunch of civil rights activists, so-called. Like, Rod asked the question,
were they doing this
willingly? Absolutely. The dwarves were organizing these events, right? It'd be, 2 or 3 or half a dozen dwarves that get together, and they owned the equipment. They bought the Velcro suits. They built the target wall and all that stuff, and they were having people pay to throw them voluntarily, right? The dwarves were running the games. Florida banned it. New York banned it. They're the only 2 states in America that banned it, by the way, because it's where it was happening.
Couldn't be two more different places
right.
either.
And Australia banned it. And there are stories about dwarves showing up and protesting the dwarf tossing. You know what? Screw you guys. Screw you little people for protesting the dwarf tossing. If you're not the dwarf being tossed, what business is it of yours what another person does voluntarily, for money or not? They just maybe they're adrenaline junkies, and it's easier and safer than bungee jumping, right? But if they want to play, let them play.
Well,
and the dwarves in Australia sued the national government for lost wages when it was banned there. Sued and won. And then the other one kind of calls back to Dinklage pulling up the ladder behind him.
I wouldn't be surprised if it's like a 6-figure thing, too.
Oh, yeah.
Man, and this whole shit with Dinklage pulling the ladder up behind him, that's so disappointing because, A, credit where it's due, guy's an amazing actor.
He is.
Absolutely. But, again, as somebody, yes, big nerd, I've read the Game of Thrones books, blah, blah, blah. We are kind of nerdy.
In fairness, he did a great job as that dwarf in Game of Thrones.
Well,
outside of that, he's done a bunch of slapstick comedy that's just, okay, whatever, you're a dwarf, and that's funny.
No, okay, look.
Like Elf.
Look, I understand, okay? But what I was getting at is, as somebody...
Boy, he is not.
Right. As somebody who's read the books, the character that he plays, Tyrion, okay, is a very intelligent, emotionally complex character. And he's also a dwarf. Okay, this is very important to the story, and not just for reasons of my racism or my classism. Is it heightism when you're discriminatory against dwarfs?
And listen, you little son of a bitch, you've never hit your head on a sign at a McDonald's, okay? You've never had to twist sideways to go into a bathroom. Have you ever had to kneel to piss on an airplane? So I don't want to hear your shit about discrimination. Right? This world is not built for people who are not basically his size. We hit our head on things, right? And you stubby little sawed-off son of a bitch, I'm sure you wouldn't hesitate to ask me to get the pickles off the top shelf if I ran into you in a Publix. So I don't need to hear about your dwarfism bullshit.
Jeff Goldblum's silent fart says he never had to duck on a roller coaster.
Yeah, well, I have.
But the point is, the role for which he is the most famous, which has probably made him stupendously rich, okay, for which he is a pop culture icon and will be for the rest of his life, okay?
To be fair, Steve, I've never been a child that failed the height side for a roller coaster.
But the entire role, okay, of Tyrion on Game of Thrones doesn't work unless he's a dwarf.
Right.
Like, his entire life in the story, his father has resented him because he's one of 2 brothers. The other brother is handsome and perfect in practically every way except for a slight case of regicide, but whatever, read the books, it's there. And then you have him, who's extremely intelligent, who would actually make an incredibly effective ruler, but because he's deformed and ugly, his father will never give him the reins of power. And without all that, there is no Tyrion character in this show. Peter Dinklage doesn't make the money that he made, but he doesn't care.
No, screw you guys. I'm pulling the ladder up behind me.
Yeah, the next Peter Dinklage could be in the Snow White movie.
Right, and the other one, another example of this, and this one's only sort of, because it wasn't Deep Roy canceling all the dwarves. It was Charlie and the Chocolate Factory when Tim Burton remade it.
Oh, that was awkward.
And
I know exactly what... Oh, that was weird,
And
man.
Johnny Depp played one of the creepiest characters.
It's just candy.
He was creepy.
Just a piece of chocolate.
I really hate that version of the story. I'll take my Gene Wilder every time. I like my Roald Dahl with a side of Gene Wilder.
And Roald Dahl can be creepy, but not that creepy.
Are we awake? Yes, we are. Are we black? Yes. Then we're awake. But we're very confused. But, I mean, the Roald Dahl story was supposed to be creepy. But in the Tim Burton version, they used Deep Roy to play all of the Oompa Loompas. They had him play all the parts, and then they mixed it and did the CGI, so that all the Oompa Loompas looked exactly the same. The dwarves of Hollywood, the midgets of Hollywood, sued the production over lost wages.
Seems to be a theme.
And it was a fair lawsuit.
Look, life is already shit all over us. I'm never going to be taller than 4.5 feet. Okay, I'm probably going to die at 48 of some genetic-related heart attack. Will you at least let me be in Hollywood movies and get paid $1,000 a day to stand around in makeup?
Okay, we're real close to the hour. Are you down to just keep rolling for a little bit? Because I got a couple more stories I'd like to talk about.
All right, let's do it. Let's make it quick, please.
It's like I've got a little time this morning. I don't have to be in Griffin until almost 11 o'clock. You got a little time to play with.
Got a little time to play with.
Okay.
It's just a surprise. We're changing our format at the last second. We're gonna lose our mod. That's what's gonna happen. We're gonna lose the Steve.
Well, we'll just have to mod on without him. Okay. So I got 3. I'd like to hit all 3. If we can't, it's okay. In fact, let me take it from the chat. I want to talk about the mayor who threatened to arrest the school board, Canadian truckers blocking highways, or Youngkin sending teachers' unions into panic mode.
I'm voting for Youngkin.
Okay, we'll start with Youngkin.
You see what I did there? It was a pun.
Yep.
Anyhow, Youngkin.
Now, we can't vote for Youngkin because we're in Georgia, but I would have. Goldblum says truckers. Sorry, Goldblum. Too slow on the draw. We're already teed up for Youngkin. Youngkin sends teachers' unions into panic mode after executing devastating plan. Chaos! Sergeant Major says Youngkin. That's a win. Okay, this one from the Western Journal. Equipping readers with the truth. Yeah, that's funny. Our motto is the truth should matter. And on an unrelated note, my hearing aids are acting weird, so everything just sounds like I've got wool in them. It's aggravating the crap out of me. Critical race theory is critical race theory by any other name. Leftists are chameleons. Chameleons change colors to blend into the environment. In this way, they protect themselves and, at the same time, are camouflaged to lure in unsuspecting prey. Proponents of CRT have adopted the chameleon's tactics.
So far, so good.
As we've been saying, this critical race theory thing has infected our public schools. And I think Scott Adams said it best. The teachers' unions. Fuck them. They are your enemy. The teachers' unions are bad. Now, here in Georgia, thankfully, our teachers are not unionized to the same extent that they are in other states, but our schools still aren't great.
Rod says that critical race critical race theory is racist as hell, canceling white people just for existing. Yes, and Rod, I'm going to assume that you know that critical race theory is race warfare, because the whole class warfare remarks that whole narrative has finally started to utterly collapse. People just don't buy it anymore. So now we've got to move on to the next thing you can get people emotionally torn up about. Oh, it's not fair that all those people are rich. Well, now it's not fair that all those people are white and rich.
What's her face?
Hey, F-bomb. I had the first F-bomb when I
Yes, you
said
did.
commie fuckers, Steve.
Yes,
Thanks,
you did.
moderator, for paying attention.
We just kind of glanced right over it. What's her name? Anyway, one of the lefties was talking about COVID stuff and how she's done with it on Bill Maher the other day. I forget her name now, but she brought up Flint, Michigan, right? And talking about that, speaking, talking about critical race theory now, and she mentioned, that's a community where 80% of the population is minority. No, sweetheart. 80% of the population is black. That makes them the opposite of minority. Right? And, globally, white people are minority. So, if you're going to talk about minority and majority in a community, being not white does not make you a minority. Unless you're in a majority white community. Now, the odds that you are in a majority white community and you have serious policy problems that are the result of electing Democrats for generations are very low, because you're the kind of people that keep electing Democrats for generations.
Yeah. There's really nothing to say apart from the fact that what happens in Flint is, what's going on in Flint is A, tragedy, B, predictable. But
And C, ongoing. Still, apparently.
And you can't say black people. And I understand exactly why she said it the way that she said it, okay? Because just over the past 50 years ago, you'll see where I'm going, why that Freudian thing just happened. But seriously, it was acceptable to use the word Negro. Mm-hmm. Then it was acceptable to use the word black. Then it was expected to use African American. Mm-hmm. And now I think we've officially moved on to POC, but I'm not real sure. Because
I think we've moved past POC and we're supposed to use BAME.
I don't even know. See, and that's the thing.
Black, Asian, minority, and ethnic.
See, I can't even keep up anymore.
Exactly.
And I
only know that one because I heard someone use it when I was watching a news clip earlier this morning.
And I know, we all know what she means when she says minority, okay? We know she doesn't mean Asian, even though they're also minorities in this country.
Well, they're minorities in that community.
No, I get it, okay? And the fact that words mean things is important. But look, we're spun off. See, I had exactly enough coffee for 30 minutes, and then you had us go long.
A lot of coffee.
Anyhow, but young.
So, here's what's making them panic. The lefties are terrified of transparency, right? Youngkin set up a tip line. He announced he has set up an email tip line where parents can report divisive practices. So the teachers' unions are incensed. They have accused Youngkin of intimidation. When a teachers' union lashes out against transparency, it should tell you something. Who watches the Watchmen when it comes to the education of our children? In Virginia, it's the parents' turn. And
well, it should always
Youngkin
be the
was
parents'
elected.
turn.
This is the issue on which Youngkin was elected.
Yes. Yeah, parents should be involved in the education of their children. And there's a reason why in local communities there's like local PTA members, because what works here in the part of Georgia we're in might not work in some rural part of Iowa. They might by necessity, for all types of reason, all types of necessary reasons. I'm going to stop tripping over my own words. Have to have completely different priorities when it comes to how they accomplish their schooling, okay? And for some strange reason, it's only the left that's like, nah, that's cool. You don't have to know and understand what we're teaching your kids. Trust us, it's the right thing. Well, hold on. I don't actually have a problem with trusting you up until you tell me to trust you. Then all of a sudden I'm like, well, wait a minute. Everybody with children understands this. When you say, what are you doing? And the kid goes, nothing.
Bullshit.
The answer's never nothing. Okay?
Bullshit. Show me what's in your mouth.
That's right. Okay, now what's behind your hands? And now let me peek around behind you. Okay, now where are your siblings? Okay? Like
now, I think I want to close on this. Rod says, white people are more than happy to avoid using derogatory terms, but terms that weren't derogatory are deemed derogatory. We've talked about this on the show many times. The abuse of our sacred mother tongue, of our language. So here's what happens, right? Like Cameron said, it used to be perfectly acceptable to say Negro. That was an acceptable alternative to the other N-word, right? And then it had to be African American, right? And then it had to be POC, because it was no longer okay to say colored people. So here's what's happening. You will be told that you should use a certain language, that you should use certain words.
You will be made to care.
And you will be battered and assaulted and berated and canceled and abused until you comply with that bizarre linguistic mandate.
And call it struggle session.
And as soon as the language changes to reflect it, as soon as people get in the habit normally of saying African American instead of Negro, then they change the term to POC, and then saying African American gets treated as if you're saying the original N-word, right? And then as soon as the worm turns enough that everybody's using POC, then they're going to change it to BAM, or whatever the next term is. The point is that in a country where we do not have a serious problem with racism, but we have a Democrat National Party that demands racism as its primary issue so that it can use the language of hate and division to try and cause false narratives and create farcical hot-button issues based on racism that is not served. There is an underserved demand for racism. There is not enough supply. And so they will create the supply by artificially changing the definition of what makes the supply flourish.
Yeah, never forget that it's almost never guys like Chris and I that are divisive. Not really. Like, I want for you and me and everybody else, I want you to work as many or as few hours as you desire. I want for you to go as far in your life as you desire. I want for you to be as rich as you desire. I want for you to be as involved in the lives of your children and your community as you desire. I want for you to have access to as much information as you desire, even the information that is verboten. Okay? I want for you to have the absolute maximum freedom of choice. In fact, as I get older, I get more and more libertarian, and I think that the vast majority of laws on the books should just be stricken. If there's not even a victim, there's not a crime. And even in crimes that have victims, we need to ask ourselves some very serious questions about the nature of that victimhood. And yet, I'm the racist. I'm the oppressive one because I believe in things like meritocracy and
being on time to work.
And being on time to work. Look, if I don't like my job,
my name right.
Here's Stacey Abrams. But we didn't even get to the Supreme Court thing, did we? We'll get there. We'll get there. Okay. And then Rod points out, and then serious questions like, what's your pronoun?
Okay, and we covered this on a show recently
All that does is disarm your speech.
Well, I'll touch it real quick, and then we'll go ahead and wrap up. The pronouns thing aggravates me to no end, because here's the thing about pronouns. We do not have gender-specific first or second person pronouns in the English language. I, you.
Hey, that was a male you.
We.
I identify as a female you. You son of a bitch.
Hey, McLeod, get off of my you. Oh yeah.
Okay. All right. I'm not going to do
so
you again.
Where we have gendered pronouns, he, she, right? These are third person designators. So when you try to tell me what your preferred pronouns are, you're trying to tell me how I will speak about you when you're not there. Shit right up your nose. I finished my contract. I don't take fucking orders from you. It's that simple. And that's where I'm going to leave it, because now I've got to go get the van and then go to Griffin.
All right.
So, by the way, Sergeant Major, I might have to ask you to either give me a ride or watch some kids, because I got to run over to Motomax and pick up my van. Love you guys. We'll see you tomorrow.
Boston Strong is back asking us.
Boston Strong, we missed you, brother.
Buddy, please keep showing up and keep asking us about video games. One day we might surprise you.
Let me change that. Boston Strong, if I ever pop up playing a game ever, your ass better log in and watch. And I'll see you there.